Alright, welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings Here in my basement. Anyway, this brain. Anyway, reacting to things sometimes. So yes, sometimes I see some other stupid video and say, okay, I'll make a response to that because it's all very stupid. So anyway, this Lawrence Anton made a video basically implying that the philosophy that understands the universe as just being a mechanical system that creates stuff. Okay, stuff can happen, and there's no judgment about good or bad. It doesn't decide whether, hey, that's a clunker, I won't do that again. No, he'll do stuff that's really dumb. Okay. And just a fact. And so it invented animals eating animals and all kinds of stupid things. And the argument is that if you philosophically understand how the universe is just a machine and just, a mechanism, that you have no obligation to respect something's existence. Merely because something exists doesn't mean it's a good thing. Smallpox, whatever. And the whatever virus. Just pick something, and there's lots of things out there that absolutely serve no good function and are just a menace to anything that just a menace to the value equation, and then they can only cause harm to sentient organisms and could do nothing of any other value. Anyway, so it's a philosophical position that you're just stuck with, that okay, there's it's just a philosophical realization that humans don't serve any purpose, that the biological infestation on Earth doesn't serve a purpose, that there's nothing particularly sacred or, anything about it, and that if it doesn't exist, like on Mars or on Uranus or on Saturn, it doesn't matter. It's not a tragedy. Nobody sheds any tears for the absent great white sharks from Mars, or the anthrax from Mars. So it's just a reality that you can have a conversation about the fact that we're just a happening in the universe, and like any other happening, it can be judged as being kind of ridiculous or silly or wasteful. It would be the argument in this case of sentient torture. So you're paying torture for it, and the argument is it worth torture? And you can philosophically understand that it's not. So there's lots of vegans out there. Vegans would say it's certainly not worth the silly indulgence of a food preference, to torture animals. But if you said, well, torturing animals will be the price you pay to have human beings, all of a sudden, is it okay? I mean, is it okay if, well, at least we survive? So if we don't survive, is our survival worth something? That is our perpetuation, the continued existence of humanity. And what price will you pay? How much will you compromise to have humanity? So would you allow, let's say, if it was going to be true that Hitler won the war and he would run the world and he would exterminate the Jews, blah, 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 would you argue, well, that's better than extermination? So if the truth was there'd be no humans, or humans that, eradicate each other in horrific a manner, is that okay with you? I mean, you're going to press the go button because that price is okay. That's an acceptable price for you to pay. You say that's acceptable. So anyway, the point is they're trying to veil the subject of recognizing the animal condition, especially, as being horrific, in the sense that they have dozens of prodigy and have to watch most of them die horribly. It's mass murder. It's mass molestation and murder of immature organisms. Okay, that's how evolution works. And the simple argument is that something you just drive by and say, well, that's the way it is there. I'm not going to do anything about it. So if you were a space traveler and, you saw some planet where it was alien against predator, and they just had dozens and dozens of children, and they just spent all day killing each other's children. You just drive by and say, yeah, I'll leave them like that. That's not, what's the big deal? It's only mass murder and molestation and horror forever. Yeah, I'm just saying, you either have a judgment, you either have an opinion, or you don't. And if you're going to say anything the universe creates is brilliant, then you're a god botherer, frankly. If you don't think it has to be suitably purposeful, and the torture has to earn you something. If the torture's not earning you something, what's the point? So anyway, this subject just brings up a ton. You could have all kinds of thought experiments about the ethics of what price can be paid for something. So let's say, I don't know what the number is, but it's millions, probably dozens of millions of people who are dramatically harmed by malaria. So it's a huge problem in the rest of the world, okay, especially in Africa and South Asia. I mean, just blights people's lives. Say the bargain was you go back in the past and you have to personally kill, like a Terminator, 3 people, just 3 random people, to cure malaria. So for the last 100 years there was no malaria because you went back and cured malaria. Would you be a good soldier, or whatever you want to call it, a good little humanitarian, and do the right thing? So, these are all little tests, push this trolley bullshit, all this little stuff. And the point is to reason out the facts. And the facts are, if I'm an atheist, and I don't think there's a God, and I understand that, everything about me was created to be a monster, frankly. I mean, we're no different than Tyrannosauruses in the method of our exploitation of the environment. And it's clear that we've demonstrated that when we have the opportunity, we will torture things for our pleasure. We'll rip their skin off and, cuddle in it, and, all kinds of fairly disgusting things that even Tyrannosauruses didn't do. And because it's a predator world. And, if that's satisfactory to you, then that's, I don't know how you can contrive that opinion without some fable to go with it about some function or purpose that all of this torture has. Then we go all the way back to, hey, this is an individual thing, in one sense. In the sense that I know how I got here. Okay, it didn't have anything to do with a decision I made. I was imposed upon. And so, and I'm finding it objectionable. I don't want to do that forever. So unless you can find some way to give me and all the other people that share my opinion that this was a farce, a really, a horror story, until you can give me some future exemption from your party, essentially putting me in the camp, why should I play along? I mean, why would a Jew play along with, yes, Hitler's going to take over the world and annihilate your kind? Why would they play along? So, what would be the rational ethics of them seeing any purpose in preserving something completely malicious to everything about their life and what they felt was valuable and important? So none of it this is just thought experiments. This is just stuff you challenge your own confidence with and your own ideals. And so this red button stuff came up just as a demonstration of confidence. For me personally, I can't see it any other way. I see the victims in the future. I know they're going to exist. And if I am giving the opportunity to rescue them, I'm going to do it. I'm going to press the button to rescue them. And that's what I'm doing. I'm not being anything malicious against your ambition to continue playing human in the universe. I'm just saying until you can do it with the exemption that you're not going to force people to do it who didn't volunteer, screw you. The victims are more important than whatever these ambitious they want to stick a flag in every square inch of the universe. That's your business. My business is preserving my welfare, and I have a right to do that. So in a sense, it is a self-defense argument. I don't want to come back here as one of your exploited animals. I don't want to come back here as one of nature's tormented creatures. I don't want consciousness arising in circumstances that are unacceptable, that I wouldn't accept as part of the bargain. I wouldn't volunteer to sacrifice myself to be eaten alive by crocodiles to save humanity, to preserve it, to stop a meteor from crashing into the earth or something. I wouldn't, fuck you. Not my problem, because it serves no purpose. So anyway, that's getting a long way around. I mean, the direct statement is this is not a subject. All right, nobody's done anything. There's no violence being created by ephilism or ephilists. Again, the core philosophy is just about sympathy, and the only time there's ever even a question about acting in some sort of aggressive way would be in a circumstance where it is definitely a rescue mission. That you're going to harm one to prevent 10 people from being harmed. So if you want to portray advocates, defenders, all of them, all freedom fighters, as some kind of monsters who want to steal your whatever property or something, you're going to claim ownership of my existence. Well, fuck that. That's not a bargaining chip. So there's just no threat here. There's no argument about any strategy for some circumstance that doesn't exist. In the current circumstance, this isn't a viable. It's not a threat in any way. Now, the fact is that maybe veganism, somebody could think that's a threat. So do you want it to be perceived as a threat in the future because vegans might someday say you can't eat meat anymore? And they might pass laws against it. So it's you could paint any minority opinion, okay, as some threat to the majority, and that's all they're really doing. And so anyway, it's not really a subject. It's it again just illustrates the quandary we're in the fact that right now we're making all of these compromises. We're accepting all kinds of collateral damage for our comfort and happiness and all that bullshit, and that's just an absolute fact. And the fact is it can be questioned as being plainly evil, and but no one does anything about it because it is. It's an uncomfortable circumstance to be. There's no win-win strategy here. One side has to win, one side has to lose. So that's all there is. But there's no civil war, and there's no realistic threat unless you're going to just preemptively say anybody who disagrees with the majority has to be destroyed or silenced because they're a threat to their future capitalist fun. And that's just bullshit. That's a bullshit tactic. So anyway, so all this is just for the purpose of maligning, by people who don't have any philosophical integrity at all. Because there's no conflict resolution that has any, you can't really make this argument that there's no possibility that the conflict will ever have to not be violent. I mean, one of the bloodiest wars in human history, the Civil War, just horrific in terms of how the people died, in the numbers. and over bullshit. You know, shouldn't have happened. Shouldn't be possible that they couldn't come up with a better answer than that. So there's nothing, we're not even, like I said, there's nowhere we're even close to that. And what was that about? You know, passing a law against owning other people and mistreating them. So what are you going to argue? Is that that cause wasn't worth it? The cause wasn't worth saying, okay, you know, I mean, obviously it wasn't worth it. Wars are never worth it, but what are you going to do? Is there a realistic option? Is the realistic option to say, okay, we'll just accept it? So we don't stop Hitler? Is that a realistic option? All right. Something like that anyway, premise-wise. So this, I don't know why this came up. So anyway, so on top of that, then there's a silly video by Madi Hari that it's again implying that we have to have some kind of aggressive philosophy against existing things beyond just the idea of, you know, euthanasia, you know, that you would just as gracefully as possible, if you had to cull something or you had to reduce a population, that you would do it benignly as possible, you know, make a bunch of never wake up berries and something like that. You know, that there's no need for it to be in any way violent or aggressive in terms of just recognizing that you know, you can die gracefully or you can die badly, and rationally you choose graceful. Anyway, but just again, these subjects are just trying to paint this philosophy in some sort of negative light, that it's going to require these sort of interventions, when it really isn't going to require that, except for the animals. I mean, obviously, you know, for the human existence to discontinue and to leave the natural system in place would be, in my opinion, insanely contradictory and duplicitous and nonsensical. So yes, you have to devise a solution for eradicating the biological infestation. But again, to think of it in terms of it being an act of violence, when that's like saying when you put your dog down or something, it's an act of violence. I mean, it's just bullshit. All right. So anyway, so I've done 3 videos so far. There'll be a 4th one. And so we'll play some of this crap, but it's just crap. You know, it's just a conversation shouldn't even have to have taken place. So as I have pointed out, we've already won the war. Okay, because what has been found out is that if you give people a life, that is, you give them an education and they have something interesting to do, they don't have kids in sufficient numbers to maintain their population. And this is something that's happened everywhere. It's happened in Japan. It's happened in every country that gains substantial civilization. So if they don't have a bunch of ignorant poor people, the fact is people voluntarily, okay, do the one child or less thing. And so you're not able to replace population, and the human race will go extinct. So if smart people were the only people, the human race would already be on a direct path to extinction, without a shot being fired or even making the argument. So the fact is, they don't even have to hear some philosophical prohibition against procreating. All they have to know is it's not in their personal interest, you know, to spend a big portion of their life taking care of essentially a retard, you know, a kid. That this isn't much of an ambition as being a natalier. Okay, natalaring yeah, isn't big fun. For most educated people, they don't think of that as, oh yeah, that'll be my big fun. You know, it's like, well, I can't even imagine what it's frankly, it's like hell. You know, for me personally, I can't describe it as anything else but hell. It's not like going bowling or something, having a kid. It's just a constant threat and burden and obligation and all of that crap, and who the fuck needs that? I mean, it's worse than the wife, you know. I mean, talk about a ball and chain. You know, kids, that's an anchor. You know. So anyway, so this all is sort of a moot conversation in the sense that people don't have to philosophically recognize the victims. They don't have to want to rescue the victims. They don't even have to do any of that stuff, and they're already going to behave as if they were an ethicist or an antinatalist at minimum, a human antinatalist. Now, yes, it's a different question. Again, what you would find acceptable to leave sentient organisms in, what kind of prison you'd say is fine. The conditions are just fine. And I would argue that, yes, you know, the biological infestation without the human beings, okay, is a pretty ugly business, where all they're doing is this nataling thing in the worst possible way, where again they have to, you know, watch their children die over and over and over again. I mean, you know, there's so many sad stories, and you just say, no, I wouldn't, I mean, are any of them, I mean, almost any one of them is enough of a sad story to say, don't ever run this movie again, because it can come out so bad, you know, and there's so many just horrific, horrible stories of humans adventuring, and all of the dismal failure that takes place, and the horrific, dismal, tormenting ends that people come to. I mean, you could just think of all the people, you know, with the atomic bombs, and all the people who died of radiation sickness, and way too high a price to pay for anything we're ever going to do. We're never going to do anything that'll make that price rational. And it's been happening on Earth for millions of years. So I mean, it's another way of looking at it, right? You can say, oh, what a tragedy it would be if an asteroid, you know, a gigantic comet came and blew the Earth in half, and everything was incinerated in, you know, 3 seconds. But the Earth is going through that all the time. There's mass extinctions all over the place. All kinds of horror has already, tsunamis, all kinds. So if you add up what's taken place, all of the displacements, you know, the glaciers, the this, the that, all the suffering that has been endured based on just the environmental conditions, volcanoes exploding, you know, all of the mass murder, you know, it adds up to more than that one event would be. The fact is, things have died horribly more times in the past, okay, than would be that one event of, you know, that catastrophe. So the little catastrophes have already happened so many times where the exact event happened. We already, you know, we already know this. There's giant craters on Earth from impacts, and they killed billions of creatures, okay, in exactly the same way. So you're preventing, in a way, you know, many magnitudes of that event happening by just saying, yeah, it'd be better if it happens once and get it over with. You know, why why kill us over and over again? You know, just get it done. Be done with the whole concept sucks. So yeah, be done with it. All right, let's just get to the video. So yeah, I'm just, you know, yeah, I could do the video over, but I'm not going to. Because, yeah, it's just, this is not a real part of the subject. It's just that this happens to be one of those subjects where, yeah, you really can't talk about exterminating all the life on Earth unless you're talking about ethylism and the futility of existence and the bad value equation that exists and the fact that it's an imposition, and, you know, it's the only conversation that goes there, just as consciousness is the only thing like consciousness. There's nothing like consciousness. You know, there's no half a consciousness somewhere. There's nothing to compare it to. All right, so play the video. Cause is worth it. So again, if you know, it's a real challenge for somebody who is vegan, you know, and actually believes that you're living among a bunch of moral criminals, ethical criminals. Right. So I mean, the fact that, you know, like I said, and so what's the difference? We haven't passed a law against it yet. So if we pass a law against it and then you do violence to the perpetrators, the criminals, it's okay. But before the law is passed, it's okay to own people, right? So I mean, I'm just saying, if you were, you know, an abolishmentist, you know, before it was abolished, you didn't have a right to say it's still unacceptable. You know, it's a real question. I mean, I guess to some extent the social contract says, no, you don't have a right until you pass your stinking laws. Okay, so let's just say in the future we pass these laws. Then is it all right to have the conversation? Criminal. Okay. The whole structure of nature, they looked at it and saw the tooth and, you know, red with tooth and claw kind of thing. You know, that it's a bloodbath. And all for the knot of, you know, you become semi-functional. So this is just the philosophical angle. So yes, the Schopenhauer's, others figured out that, oh, yeah, this is kind of a, you know, horrible circle of tragedy and nastiness. You know, all kinds of sad stories and all kinds of very high prices being paid, and you're saying for what? You know, so you know, we can wear little fancy clothes and go to parties, and you know, what, you know, it's worth torturing things for this. And yes, so it's occurred to other people that life sucks. It's not a new subject. I didn't invent it. Because that's what parents are doing to their kids. I guess to some extent, all right, you know, my only invention was to separate myself from people who just don't like kids. Yeah. Or people who think having kids is a waste, or some other kind of crap, when, you know, the subject, or people who think human culture is some sort of evil thing, you know, and it's human beings that are doing it wrong, and, you know, nature's beautiful. So yeah, I invented ethylism just for the purpose of saying, no, my argument's against the whole biological idea of life, okay, of making machines that are trying to take territory, and they do it by consuming other living things and causing all kinds of harm, and it's wasted. It's really stupid. Yeah.
In the early period of the universe, it was ultimately benign, and in
okay, so ultimately benign, yes, before the invention of the neuron, okay, and the consequential invention of a processor, you know, that could actually do some practical figuring and reflexive, you know, they're just switches, just like a calculator on your computer or your iPhone. It's just switches, and that's all we are, is switches that create behavior. And one of the functions we have, unlike an iPhone, is we feel. And unfortunately, there's value in the essence of those feelings that we can all sample. You know, just stick a nail in your eye, and you'll figure out pretty fast that there's bad in the world. You know, and being enslaved, you know, and that's when you're getting pushed under the quicksand and you have to gasp and gasp. Right, so that's all life is this struggle to get a cleaner breath of air, you know, a more satisfying meal, a more comfy couch. You know, it's all it is. It's just trying to find comfort. Like right now, my back is a little fucked. I'm a little tired. I got old man miseries, and it's so I'm struggling to be comfortable. And that's not a game to play. Struggle to be comfortable. Let's go play it. Yeah, no. You buy it for your kids? Ugh. Yeah, fuck you. Alright, back. So I was thinking, and it's hard to explain this video that he made and my response, in the sense that you really have to watch the video. I mean, it's just this long kind of setup to, in the conclusion, just say something like, somehow ephilism, or understanding that the nature of existence is a negative. Okay, it's not running a profit. It obviously imposes on some conditions so horrific that you can't justify it for a joyride. So you can't harm somebody, make somebody sick, so you can sing and dance, kind of bullshit. And somehow implying that having that thought, recognizing that fact, is somehow itself an act of violence or something. It means you have to do violence, when it doesn't mean any of that. There's no connection between the two things, beyond recognition that, yes, that the way things currently are, politically, yeah, you can't sell it. Okay, you couldn't run for president on this platform, but maybe in 1,000 years you could. So, and the whole argument is the only thing that prevents that from happening is ignorance. So here he's arguing, defending essentially the fact that what's the real opposition to the fundamental argument that we're in a very bad condition, a very bad circumstance, being a living thing. Does he think the future is going to be run by ayatollahs? Is that the people are going to become dumber? Is that the real threat? Because that's the only way you could contrive this into some kind of civil war being necessary, or some kind of horrific battle where you have to, choke to death the evil breeders and whatnot. Because that's the only way it's a real probability or possibility. Because the fact is, as long as there's more intelligent people than stupid people, it's not a problem. Because the intelligent people are, by volition and choice, choosing not to be natalers. Just a fact. Alright, well, anyway. Trying to reiterate that point, and I'm just not doing it very eloquently, but, you get what you get. Well, I can imagine that we could invent a piece of nanotechnology that would sterilize all biological life, because it's all based on this. Right, so you can argue that if that's the necessity, we can do that. But again, I'm saying there's no rational taboo against death that happens this fast. So if you're going to argue that it's a harm, what's the harm part? Not procreating, okay, or going through some, for animals anyway. Does it make any difference? No, they're going to die anyway. You're going to make their death more graceful. So what did you lose? Some hours? You're really going to argue about a few hours of being alive in the context of millions of years of biological infestation, hundreds of millions of years? You're going to argue about, well, they didn't get to live their 46 days. What do you mean? They're going to live 5 years more. Oh, and you took that away from them, and you took away their horrible death. I mean, it's. I'm just saying, there's elements to the conversation that are just so imbecilic. You're saying, wait, I have to explain that for an animal, you're not doing it a favor by saying, let's let it be eaten by a lion, or let's let it get eaten by the crocodile, or let it get washed downstream by the flood, or whatever the bad end is going to be. What are you arguing about? I mean, it's so trivially stupid to argue about some tiny, almost invisible amount of bad in the context of what has been going on every minute of our existence and for hundreds of millions of years previous to our existence. Same cells and all this, just so silly. Critters that are being brutalized. I think people would have every right because they're fighting a wrong. But we know that pragmatically they're not going to win that war. Right. So again, I certainly haven't heard any ethicists who are advocating for everybody getting all charged up and go out and do terrorist acts or something. And terrorism against what? What exactly it would be it's an all or nothing thing. You don't do it halfway. There's no point, in whatever analogy I can use. You got 100 people that are infected with something, and you only cure 50 of them and leave the other 50 to go infect everybody else or something. You either do it or you don't, because it's not the kind of thing where you accomplish anything by killing 99.99%. It's everything or you lose, because it just grows back. I mean, these are like weeds. If you don't pull them all, you're done. You're going to lose. Inexpensive and as harsh as possible. And there's no ethicist who's not advocating for that. So again, this is just such a bullshit pigeonhole nonsense to say there's some emotional need to smite the human race or to smite living things. Bullshit. Right. So again, that's it's so disgusting to attempt to paint this as an act of violence. So I analogize it to, they try to do that to people who commit suicide. They say that it's an emotion. People are hating themselves, and that's why they kill themselves. It's an act of violence and hate and all of this bullshit, when no, it's again, it's always somebody jumping ship, saying I can't, can't do this, can't play that, and you can only have sympathy. And extinction by any means necessary. So I don't even know what that means, right? Necessary completing the... So again, this any means thing is, obviously the means is tied to the accomplishment. And it almost, again, it's like, how badly can I kill everything on Earth to add up to all of the pain and suffering that will be endured if I didn't do it, so to speak. So if it took 4 milliseconds, or at 5 milliseconds, and I could get up, well, if I killed them in an hour, they slowly died for an hour. I'm still way ahead of nature. So, it's, and clearly the ambition would be to do everything as best possible, is to reduce harm. So again, to make it into some sort of, they're just trying to paint it as some sort of, wife-beating event or something. Suffering on Earth. Even if, I stuck a nail in the eye of every living thing today to prevent that, I'd probably still be running a huge profit. Right. So how do I actually compete with how bad nature will treat animals on this planet going into the future? I mean, there's just, how do I compete with being worse than a worse caregiver? I can't possibly be a worse nanny. I mean, it's really just not possible. So, why do the humans first and then the animals will somehow eventually die maybe 1 billion years later? I mean, that's not a solution. So, yeah, the animals are just retarded versions of us. So why are we pretending that something's going to save them besides us? There's nobody to save them but us. Ugh, this is so bad.
to negative utilitarianism. In his paper Negative Utilitarianism, Smart says this: suppose that a ruler controls a weapon capable of instantly and painlessly destroying the human race. Consequently, the use of the weapon is bound to diminish suffering and would be the ruler's duty on negative utilitarian grounds. Would not our benevolent world exploder be truly the saviour of mankind? And
the fact is, yeah. So, but yeah, it's a complete violation of what we know as a social contract and, you know, limitations on personal arrogance and all of this kind of crap. But it's a real question in terms of, well, yeah, you either kill Hitler or you don't kill Hitler, right? There's going to be two different worlds, one world, the other world. And frankly, if somebody's put in a position where they have to make the choice, it's either going to be one outcome or the other outcome. And I'm just saying you have to use your best judgment, right? If you're in the situation, you have to apply your best judgment. What other choice do you have? Again, if I had to be the one to, you know, be tortured for 1,000,000 years to get the job done. I mean, even if you could say tortured for 1,000,000 years just to cure malaria, you'd have to almost say, yeah, go ahead. Because what people are going through right now because of that disease, in terms of the suffering, is more than that. Okay, 1 hour of malaria on Earth is a 1,000,000 years of one lifetime of malaria. You know, so I mean, it's, yeah, they're real decisions, fuckheads. You know, and to pretend that we can't think it and we can't argue it, well, bullshit, we can't.
Theocentric antinatalist, but
I don't even know why people would call themselves something queer, sentiocentric, whatever. I don't know who started that fad, but fuck that. Again, so, you know, a subject for which I don't think Benatar is an expert, so how does he know whether there's any practical use to trying to prevent it? It's already going to happen. And it might be a lot more pragmatic to just accept that we're going back to the Jurassic and we'll have to live a little different. Yeah, so that's the global warming argument. God. Yuck. No commercials, yeah.
Yuck.
So all you're doing is saying, I'm exchanging their horrible slow death for a nice, quick, expedient one. Oh, what a criminal I am.
Project.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's where it gets laughably ludicrous, is, again, this idea that somehow being dead is a harm, which is idiotic. I mean, it's just stupid to think so. Being dead isn't a problem. Dying, that's a problem for a feeling organism. Now, and obviously you can die in your sleep and there's no problem. So but we're just saying that obviously the process of stopping something from existing implies some physical unpleasantness to get to that state where you no longer function. So it's breaking something, and breaking isn't intuitively connected with pleasant. It's obviously connected to that's going to hurt.
Argument, or the consent argument. Neither of these commit someone to philosophical battle.
They can be anti-natalist. So the consent argument obviously is a powerful argument from any perspective, from an individual's perspective, their own defense of their own territory. You know, you're not allowed to keep playing with my existence, so to speak. I don't want to reoccur, as Nietzsche would say. And you don't have a right to keep reoccurring me. You know, so it's a powerful argument. They have no counter argument for it. You don't have consent. It's an arrogant and obnoxious imposition to assume I want to play your fucking silly song and dance game at the insanely high price you're paying for it. Fuck you. Play with yourself. Alright, so on to 2. So I guess that's all I'll do is I will save the Benatar stuff for next week, I guess. Just as, you know, it's just as, yes, just as bad. Anyway, let's, oh, I have to do this, I believe. Did that work? Probably. All right, continuing. I don't really want to use the word novelty. I want to use words like originality or unique. But so this kind of crap, like you're saying, what is the novelty of Ephilism? Does it add anything to the story? When, of course, it adds something to the story in the sense that it recognizes the focus, which is we understand that animals are just dumber versions of us. They're not less functional versions of us. They do have a sentient welfare that's very important, just as important as ours. It's just, it's not scientifically reasonable to suspect animals don't feel, okay, richly, okay, that their reward and punishment mechanism somehow is disabled or non-functional, when you can clearly see in their behavior how it's functioning just fine. You know, they have to keep fleas off of them. They have to do all this maintenance, and the only way they can do that maintenance is to be just like us, harassed into doing it. You know, just bullshit. They're just as itchy and scratchy as we are, and their welfare has to be part of any kind of rational conversation about what the game is, because they're players in the game.
Outweighs the pain, or at any rate there is an even balance between the two. If the reader wishes to see shortly whether this statement is true, let him compare the respective feelings of two animals, one of which is engaged.
So he's talking about people who weren't technically Ephilus, but were Ephilus in the sense that, okay, the one woman he talked about clearly would blow the world up, and this guy is also arguing, you know, clearly that this really is a dismal circumstance we're stuck in. There's only one piece of the puzzle. I mean, there's no fun solution. You know, there's just this unpleasant realization that it's failure, and we have to just mop up the vomit, so to speak. There's no good job here. You know, there's no happy ending. You know, just like reality. They're not going to live happily ever after. We're not going to have some fun and interesting adventure. No. Because that's not the way the world's built. It's not the way it works. The system isn't interested in, it can't, let's just put it that way. It can't, it has to, the only way it can make us think we're fixing something is it has to make us think something's broken and needs us. And it's just a delusion. Because there is nothing broken except for our existence. Our existence is the only flaw in the universe.
Per year in the natural world is beyond all decent contemplation.
You contemplate it all the time, so he calls it the greatest show on earth. That's another title. Oh, so it was one of Dawkins' quotes, and you know, Dawkins is such an asshole. So Dawkins is doing a little, you know, he's giving a little bit of attention to the horrors of nature. Yet he never became vegan, as far as I know. Never even made any statements implying that this is truly horrific. If we had any ethical integrity, any sympathy, any decent feelings at all, we should be horrified at what has been paid, the insane price that is paid for these pompous assholes to exist. Yeah, we all should be just humiliated at what the cost was for us to sit there. Oh, look, I'm making a video and I'm talking crap. Blah, 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 blah. And things were tortured for that. What? Yeah, no. Back and watch the sunset and pretend there's no problems in the world, and certainly wouldn't be imposed upon to actually say something or do something. Fuck that. Yeah, so it's just, there's nothing to see. No, it's not a big deal. No. you know, that's their attitude. Okay, this is not a real subject, you know, from their perspective, because it's completely unactionable. There's nothing you can't talk about it because you're projected to be causing some kind of aggression against the peace and quiet, the comfort. You know, where the fact is, in the 30s and 40s and 50s, people were quite comfortable. Nobody was doing all this animal rights advocacy and all that kind of crap, and everybody's quite comfortable, and we just disturbed their comfort. Yeah, that's all they've accomplished, these vegans. So yeah, just label them terrorists.
Existing views, including philosophical pessimism, negative utilitarianism,
I mean, it's just amazing that they have to give all of these silly religions. Yeah, they all got to have a title, some kind of philosophical niche. You know, and again, the only purpose is to discuss whether or not you believe humans are the problem, or you believe sentient organisms on Earth are the problem. And that's the only distinction that needs to be made.
And so it seems valuable to have some identifying term for it.
Yeah, except he's just going to say that the identifiable term should be violent lunatic. So if you're an ethicist, you should be just labeled violent lunatic. That's his critique. Yeah, it's nonsense. Yeah, just it is insufferable.
On that, I've linked that in the description. I do think it would be better if there were no sentient life in the universe. But just because I think that it
would be, just because I think it would be better, I'm not going to advocate for the better world. I'm not going to suggest that the better world should be the one we're pointed towards. That's not the one we should work towards. That's not the one we should argue for. Yeah, is that stupid? Oh, fuck. Just can't believe, you know, people are just so fucking stupid. I mean, you know, his philosophy, he used to be an ethicist. That's the joke, you know. What the fuck does that have to do with me? Cunt.
I also share a concern for other animals. Domesticated animals are treated as slaves, and they are systemically...
So domesticated animals, so that's his concern for animals. Whereas domesticated animals, you know, farmed animals and whatever, pets that we have to do all kinds of surgeries on, you know, and we genetically turn into little monsters. But no, nature, that's okay. You know. Yeah, it's just horseshit. Humans are criminal. It is criminal to impose on kids. It's criminal to indoctrinate. It's criminal to do all these things. Right, so it's all acceptable, right? So just, you know, there's a point where you say, no, it's not acceptable, right? I mean, how ignorant are you allowed to, I mean, how badly are you allowed to raise a child? You know, you know, where it's not called what it is. It's a molestation. It's, you know, and religion is a molestation. And yet those things are applauded by the culture as some sort of meritorious thing, you know. Yeah, teach your kid how to be a football player. You know, what? Yeah, what? You know, it's just, you know, they're there. It's okay. So when they're getting eaten by the lion, you can go over there and, you know, just tap on the forehead. Say, they're there. It's okay. Okay. So that's all they're going to offer is Band-Aids. You know, they're not going to cure anything. They're just going to sit there and say that, oh, well, all we can offer is, you know, well, as the animal's dying, you know, we'll give it some cup of soup or something. I mean, it's just ridiculous thing to do with atheism. Ah, let's see what that is.
This is by Oscar Horta. Having shared my sympathies, here are my...
Okay, his sympathies. He has no sympathy with any... Right, so his sympathies didn't mean anything because he just says, yeah, I believe it's better, but I won't do anything to cause the better to happen. And then he has a critique here, so maybe we'll play some of this for the critique. Anything that'll actually fix a problem. So he's completely unsympathetic to any suggestion that will actually fix something, because to fix something means you had to impose your fixing, and that's wrong.
critiques nirvana fallacy.
Oh, whatever that is. Oh, brother. So this will have nothing to do. Obviously, nirvana has nothing to do with apholism. Your personal escape, okay, isn't the sub. Yeah, that's nirvana. You know, is really just a story about how you can personally escape coming back as a mosquito, you know, by jumping in a fire. Subject at all.
My first critique of apholism is that I believe it commits the nirvana fallacy, or the perfect solution fallacy.
Yeah, so again, you know, he has no science education. He doesn't know anything about how the universe actually functions, and he's basically saying there's no way you could sterilize the planet Earth. Okay, it can't happen. It's not physically possible for the universe to accomplish, for that task to be accomplished in this universe or something. And it's just ridiculous as a statement.
Presents what is claimed to be a perfect solution to...
I mean, it's just, who's presenting this perfect solution? Right, you know, and the perfect solution would be what? The red button we talk about. Oh, yeah, it just happens that fast. Yeah. But whatever, it's literally and practically a fact that there's no real technical barrier. Okay, the universe can produce dramatic events, supernovas. They happen. You know, it's doable. And the Earth has done this over and over again. Okay, where it's completely changed the boundaries. Okay, there's no dinosaurs, right? So let's just say that brain enabledness is like dinosaurism. Well, clearly there's probably a catastrophe that could take place that would take out all the brain enabled organisms, you know. So yeah, he's just saying that somehow it's a fallacy that there's a reasonably efficient mechanical solution, when of course there is. Never wake up, berries. Basically, if you just educate children, so if they're educated, they don't replicate sufficiently to maintain existence. Fact. So there's the draconian solution. Educate humans. Yeah. Ooh, how scary is that? Oh.
This is logically possible, and it would stop all traffic accidents, which are a problem, just like it's logically possible to end all sentient...
So this is obviously some kind of, you know, this is the bait and switch, and the changing the goalpost, and straw man. Yeah, this is the real, this is the grass man or something. It's not even good straw. Bullshit argument. Okay. Clearly there are ways of engineering, okay, the yes, and especially when it's done on purpose. Like I said, we haven't even, we've never even tried to imagine the project, let alone, you know, figure out that it can't be done. I mean, it's not, you know, there is nothing stopping us from providing every human with a graceful death right now. There's no technical obstacle. It's a matter of will. Okay, so, you know, this is just bullshit. Go to war until you've at least negotiated a solution. So first you negotiate, and that's the process we're in. We're in the process of negotiating, and you're saying to the opposition, don't negotiate. They're terrorists. They want to kill us. Yeah, you know, they're just stirring bullshit up. So, I mean, these people are just, you know, I'm just going to say, if you have any sympathy for the Ephelist position, this guy isn't on your side. They're not going to vote for what needs to be done. So do you captain the boat or do you not? So we're back to do and do not do, and whatever democracy or social contract or all this other crap doesn't mean anything. What's the outcome going to be? Disaster or success? Yeah, and that's all there really is here. Okay, there's no try. There's just either do or do not do. There's either fix the problem or leave the problem or insufficiently fix the problem or whatever. But I'm just saying there's no you don't have an option, a third option. And so yeah, there's no win-win. Well, you just implied that it did, you fuck. You're saying that somehow you are going to compromise the good, okay, by trying to do the gooder. So that's his argument. It's somehow trying to really fix the problem is going to get in the way of them band-aiding. So they can't go collect the tears from all the dying animals, put on their shelf as a trophy. If we kill them off, we have the complete solution, then they won't be able to be nurses anymore. It's some kind of bullshit like that. That it really is. It's like the healthcare. It's like doctors who, continually vote to be against, the right to die because of their own self-interest, because it's the money. And feel people's pain in your fake and phony way.
Achievable goods to a grand solution that is liable to the other critiques that I'm laying out.
The other critiques. Fuck you. So he says justifying violence and a lack of appreciation for fallibility. So again, the fallibility would be what? There is a God? So again, this is just such bullshit that I have to invest in a ludicrous fallibility. So it's one thing if they had a reasonable argument to defeat the fact that it's just billions, hundreds of millions of years of crude and horrific DNA replicating, and that it's basically just been the mass murder of children, okay, for hundreds of millions of years, and nothing else really has gone on. That's the story. You mass murder children, you lay some eggs and die. You mass murder some children, lay eggs and die. It's just carnage. It's just a meat grinder. And he's saying there's some fallibility there. That there's some reasonable counter-argument. There's no reasonable counter-argument. That's all that's happening here. Struggle, death, struggle, death, struggle, death. That's the way, and he's selling it. So just understand, he's selling it as, no, you don't want to stop that. All right, take a pause. All right, back. Continuing.
Justifying violence and a lack of appreciation.
Oh, fuck you. Yeah, that's all I could say. I mean, it's just amazing. What violence has been justified or even, suggested as something that's going to happen tomorrow? Just such bullshit. Because then that's all they look like. Oh, fuck you.
Supports such an endeavor would presumably support the one that minimizes harm. But in reality...
I mean, I've pointed out we already have won the argument. The only enemy we have is ignorance. Human ignorance. Stupid humans breed. Stupid humans do lots of other things that are really bad too. So, yeah, let's have a war against stupid humans.
It's difficult to identify which means would actually minimize harm. And even then, it's not obvious that we would actually be able to implement that means.
Right, so he's saying you can't solve the problem when, of course, you can. And so he's just trying to pretend there's no solution. And so therefore, we have to just be sad, like Buddhists. We have to just say, life is suffering, so what? Have some kids. Yes, and then jump in a fire. It'll be fun. Ridiculous. It's fault somehow. And again, we're guilty by what association exactly? Where has there been any defense of any violence beyond the violence that happens for good causes? Beyond the Americans showing up in Europe to save the day? Beyond that, give me your description of what's been defended as violence or terrorism or any of that crap. So again, every real circumstance requires, you got to break some eggs and all that kind of crap. But the real point that's being made is that the human condition problem is solved by education. Okay, so that's the only violence you have to commit is you have to say, okay, we're at some point going to say we're not going to leave any child behind. We're not going to leave any ignorant ones. and therefore, you know, the vast majority of human beings will, by the time they reach maturity, have some humility and some recognition that this isn't a fable written by a god, all right, and that this is a story about being a biological organism on Earth. We're the ones with a complex intelligence, and obviously if something's going to drive this bus, it's got to be us. For a fable.
The wider world has no contact with or knowledge.
I mean, look, you could even say all of these people that have kids are deluded. You know, they have this delusion that it's all going to work out just fine, that everything's going to be just fine, that it'll be worth it. Yeah, so if any kind of fallacy that an ethicist could be argued to have about the fact that it's physically capable, their fantasies that somehow we're going somewhere, that there's some job to do in the universe, is just such bullshit. He's left behind and he can blow it up a second time. How's that? Oh, yeah, then he said you can't do it, so you need some backup plan. And I said, yeah, well, so, okay, let's blow up the world, and then we'll blow up the little pieces. I'll make, you know, we just put spaceships out there far enough away, and so after it's blown up, it can blow up all the little pieces. I mean, it's just ludicrous. And then we can have a plan Z and D and E. You know, we can just have more and more plans, backup plans. It was just so ridiculous. Of course you can do that. I could, you know, I could euthanize somebody, and then I could, you know, throw them in a furnace, and then I could, you know, scatter their ash. You know, what? They're not coming back. You know, they're not going to regrow like a sponge. The universe doesn't just bestow you with knowledge and understanding. You have to go through all this hard work to get it. Blah, 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 blah. Life, death, struggle, struggle, eek, eek. Anyway. This is whatever this is, right? The Strong Legal Protection Act. You know, that'll be nothing. Just like all the right to die legislation that's nothing. Just a placeholder for the real thing. No. Just an empty gesture, pretending we've solved the problem, and it solves nothing.
This is abolished, and supporting research into the methods of alleviating the suffering of wild animals.
Why would you... so just, you can just imagine how... You talk about a fallacy... Okay, the idea that you can go out and individually, you know, take care of the animal problem is just ridiculous. You're going to individually go have therapy and talk about how, well, you shouldn't have kittens, and, you know, it's not good, and your kittens aren't going to do very well, and, you know, men are bad. Don't go near all them, you know, those male cats. They're just evil. It's just a ridiculous argument. This is why, yeah, I don't really do the community thing. Yeah. Yeah, fuck it. Yeah, people suck. They suck at being reasonable, frankly. And that's the truth. So anyway, so yeah, that's enough. Yeah, of that. And like I said, I don't know. You sort of do have to watch the videos in this case, I suppose, to really get the flavor of his antagonism, and how it is just pretty much directed at ephilism for absolutely no reason, as if it's some cause of some kind of negative event that took place where we started saying, okay, instead of talking about humans, the human condition, we'll talk about the animal condition, because we're just animals. And just understand, okay, yeah, we live a little different than the other animals because of our intelligence, but we're still biological animals. We're still playing by the same rules. We still have to deal with all of these impulses and bullshit that goes on. It's still an animal organism, and there's just no point in having a conversation about the human condition without having a conversation of equal focus, in that it's an argument about the animal condition. And then you could narrow it, if you have to obviously the brain enabled animal organism. Alright, so anyway, till the next time and such and so forth, and whatnot, to call that a video. Not entirely pleased with my performance, but, you know, you win some, you lose some. So anyway, till the next time, and such and so forth, and whatnot.